Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new TEAM therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hello, David, and welcome to all of our listeners around the country, around the world, throughout the galaxy. This is the Feeling Good podcast, and we are at episode 453. David likes to begin our podcasts with a brief introduction of what we're going to say. Before David does that, I'd love to introduce our incredible guests. Today, we are going to be talking with Jacob Towery. Jacob is a person who is also an adolescent and adult psychiatrist. He went to various schools and did some really cool stuff. He has many flaws, but he also has a handful of strengths. His current favorite colors are blue, red, and canary yellow. He does reserve the right to change his favorite colors at any time without apology. Jacob enjoys silliness, seriousness, Iliism, reading fantasy novels while soaking in the same tub for hours, alone time, time with people, and gratuitously long lists. For the sake of this podcast, it's just kind of an interesting thing to know about Jacob is that between 2012 and 2020, he dated hundreds of different women and is now involved in a monogamous relationship. Hi, Jacob.
Hi. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And we also have Sydney. Sydney is a dear friend of mine. She's in her first year out of college after studying feminist studies and sociology at the University of California at Santa Cruz. She's looking forward to working and organizing within her community, and Sydney loves to cook, read, and take on any new craft. Hi, Sydney.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And another dear friend of mine is Sophie. And Sophie is a recent college graduate from the University of California at Berkeley, where she studied cognitive science and data science. She was born and raised in Oakland, California, and she hopes to pursue a career in AI ethics. She loves to paint, hike, sew, read, and she plays a wicked guitar.
Well,
Hi, Sophie. And also has a really beautiful singing voice.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Great. So, David, tell us, our listeners, what they're going to hear today.
Well, this is going to be the first in a series of podcasts on the secrets of dating. And we'll be going over lots of topics from, how to flirt, how to get dates, how to talk to people you're interested in, how to avoid chasing them, how to get them chasing you, and also your inner dialogue, like when you're rejected or ghosted and that type of thing. How to avoid falling into depression and insecurity and inadequacy. Also, we're hoping to upgrade my book, Intimate Connections, which was my own personal experience in dating and coming out of my innate or learned nerdiness when I was growing up in a kind of a little bit of a rigid, Lutheran background. I would say that, and I had to learn how to loosen up, and that I was a phase when I was in medical school, and that information turned out to be more useful to me and to my clinical practice than anything I ever learned in psychiatric residency training. And so we're hoping to update that book. The principles in intimate connections are still true and will be true 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now. But we're going to, update a lot of things. So that's why we're so thrilled to have you, Sydney and Sophie, on today's podcast. And the last thing I'll say is when I was in clinical practice, 60% of my patients, I've had like 40,000 hours of clinical work with people with depression and anxiety and insecurity. But I kept kind of a database on my clinical work and my patients. And I was surprised that 60% of them were not in loving relationships. And that was the main focus of why they came for therapy, either that they had been divorced and didn't know how to get back into the dating scene, or they'd never really kind of learned the ropes of dating and hustling and relationships, in the first place. And they were still trying to find their way into intimate relationships. And so it became my favorite topic in my clinical work. It's one of my favorite topics in the world, and something that has been useful as well in, having a son and a daughter and, helping them navigate through high school and, grammar school and, getting into dating and kind of teaching them the ropes, so to speak, was an awful lot of fun. So I'm hoping we'll have some fun. But if you're struggling with relationships and getting the runaround from people or not knowing how to get dates, or you get a date and then you get ghosted, and then you get all upset about that, these podcasts will be for you. I don't know if we'll have 2 or 3 or 4 or even more on this topic, but it's certainly a topic of tremendous interest to almost everyone.
Well, today we're going to focus on the challenges of dating apps. And I was wondering if you guys would mind start telling us some of the challenges you've experienced. And Jacob, maybe you could tell us what you liked about it, what you liked about dating people and your journey to finding the woman that you're in a relationship with now. But Sophie, can you tell us what some of the challenges are and your frustrations with using dating apps?
Yeah, Sid and I were brainstorming this yesterday. And I think there's a lot of good stuff about dating apps, but I think some of the primary challenges are, firstly, the algorithms. I have some qualms with the algorithm, but I think some of the main challenges are that people start to feel a little disposable. It's hard to know who to pick out of the crowd. So for women, I've heard that it's much easier to get matches. So I didn't have problems getting matches on the dating app. But it was hard to know, should I actually go and meet this person in real life? Will it be a waste of time? Will it make me feel good? Will it make me feel connected? Or will it just make me feel like I met someone through a dating app and that's kind of weird and awkward? Sid, do you want to build on that a little bit?
Yeah, I feel like the algorithm, I totally agree with, has a lot of negative impact. Whether or not you think it does in the moment, it can kind of catch you off guard later too. But I would say I totally agree with with what Sophie just said. And then to add on top of that, I also think you can not know someone's intentions. They can be very different than yours, and different apps mean different intentions, and that can get really confusing when, even if you're interested in the same thing, you may have a specific intention around that similar thing, say hookups or dating longer. It can get really confusing, and often the app itself is not doing a great job at creating and introducing those conversations and making them easier.
What is it that they're not a good job of doing? You just mentioned, Sydney. Could you explain that a little bit?
I would say maybe it's our connection with the other person too. Maybe it's not the app itself, but like generally apps are supposed to be split by like intention of like hookup versus dating or like short-term dating. And that I feel like has been more culturally defined than the app itself. But like on the app, there's one kind of button that you could be like, oh, this is what I'm interested in. But what you could be interested in is a broad spectrum of things, maybe possibly all of them. And it's just a hard thing to communicate.
Yeah. And it also, when you're on the app and you're trying to understand what other people want, it's almost like, okay, is it a red flag that they put short-term relationship, or is that actually what I'm interested in? So it's a very vague definition of all of the different types of dating someone might be interested in. So yeah, and then when you're putting your own, you're like, is this a red flag that I'm putting this? I don't know. It's like, because you don't, like, no one even knows what it means. So it's really hard to communicate. I agree.
Yeah. It's that experience of when you get a text message from somebody and you can't read the intention behind it. This could mean something positive and this could mean something negative. And maybe I should just pick up the phone and call this person. But you don't have the person's number, and that would be really weird to pick up the phone and call this person.
Tell us about what I think Jacob can help us out here, but because I'm kind of the elderly one out of the loop for it's only about 5 decades I've been out of the loop.
That's it.
But are you talking about the difference between just people who want to get sex and get laid versus people who are looking for more of a long-term relationship, or what do you mean about the different kinds of intentions that are hard to read in people that can be confusing?
Yeah, I feel like the clearest difference is a hookup versus dating. But on these apps, like, there's so many different ways to say that. You could hook up, like, it could be hookup, it could be short-term dating, it could be long-term dating, it could be polyamorous dating, it could be, like, there's so much going on. And also that's, I think, because, yeah, so even with all those different descriptors, it's still really confusing.
Yeah, whereas, just to contrast it, if you met someone in real life, first of all, it's easier to tell what someone's looking for in real life if you've talked to them a couple times. And then also you can just ask them outright, what are you looking for, and get their take on it. I usually tend to believe that people are not lying and they'll tell you the truth about that. But yeah, if you're just scrolling through people online, it's really hard to get that initial pulse on someone's intentions. I think that's a big distinction.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this topic. This is a fun topic. So for background, I got divorced in 2012 and I was newly single. I'd learned a ton from David as one of my main mentors at Stanford about flirting, and I got on the app. So I was on a million apps at various times from 2012 to 2020. I was on Match, OkCupid, Plenty of Fish, Tinder, Hinge, Bumble, Coffee Meets Bagel, and there's probably like a couple more I've forgotten. But I was on The League. I was on a ton of apps, and I was also dating people in real life. So it was almost like another full-time job besides seeing patients. And I thought it was really fun. It was a very fun period for me. I think, like you guys mentioned, one of the challenges with dating apps is it's very easy to treat people as objects or as disposable. So my recommendation to people is assume that other people will treat you like an object to some degree, but that doesn't mean you have to do the same. So just from a karma perspective, I would encourage any listeners out there to not treat people on the apps as objects and instead treat them as if they are fully autonomous humans, just like you are a human, and their desires and feelings matter just as much as your desires and feelings. And so if you can have that at the forefront of your mind and treat them like they are another full human just like you, with respect and dignity and care, you're kind of generating good karma. And you're helping to solve the very problem you might be complaining about. So that includes, I recommend, particularly once you've gone on one or more dates with someone else, I recommend don't ghost them. And we could talk about, I have a way of kind of communicating if you're not interested in someone, but we could talk about that, but don't just ghost them. I think be thoughtful in how you communicate with people. So don't say anything to people on an app that you wouldn't actually say if you were in real life with another person. So don't think, oh, because I'm hiding behind a screen, I can just send a picture of my penis and that'll be fine. They might not want that. So if you haven't asked for that, don't just assume that people want that. Or don't write, extremely vulgar things that you think people wouldn't want to read or you wouldn't feel comfortable saying to someone if you met them in person. So I think treating people as humans is good. And I think getting off the app and into real life as soon as possible is really good. Because I think one of the number one errors people make is they end up being pen pals with people and they'll just have messaging back and forth. And almost nobody really wants that. There might be a small number of people, but most people I think actually want to use it as a springboard to meet up in real life. So regardless of what gender you identify with, I recommend after 2 or 3 messages, feel free to be like, hey, do you want to hop on FaceTime soon? Or do you want to go get coffee? Or do you want to go get ice cream? And use it as a springboard to actually meet up in real life, because it's very difficult looking at a 2-dimensional screen to get a lot out of who this person is and what's the chemistry going to be like. But if you actually meet up in real life, you're going to much sooner get that feel. I think FaceTime is a decent, quick alternative where you can get a little more data. But even that, I think it's better to use that as a springboard to soon meeting up in real life and gathering more data.
Jacob, is there an unwritten rule about how many interactions you should have on text before you meet up?
I think less is better than more. So for me, I'm happy to do maybe 2 or 3 messages back and forth. But if I'm getting a good vibe from this person, I want to then see what are we like in real life. I don't want to do 20 messages because that's time I could be doing anything else that I would probably enjoy more. So if I spend time doing 20 messages and then there's no connection with the person in real life, that's the opportunity cost is that's time I could have been messaging with someone else or surfing or reading a fantasy book or something else. So I think you should assume you're not going to be able to feel out from more messages whether this person is awesome and whether it's a good fit or not, and assume that the messages are just a springboard to meeting up in real life.
And when you guys talk about intentions not being clear, have you found that people are not honest in their profile? Like somebody saying they're a different age or even a different sex or different than who they turn out to be?
I feel like the only time people are not honest with their age is like when they joined an app before they turned 18. And so now their age is set to that one age that they put it at when they first joined, which was 18. They could have been like 17. That's the only time it comes up where somebody's like, actually, I'm not that old. But I feel like that's more common with like people our age because the apps were getting popular when we were like 16, 17. And so a lot of people just jumped on them to see what was going on and like what was happening. But other than that, I don't really feel like people lie. Obviously, I feel like it's like an Instagram profile. You're still putting your best photos forward. So there's that aspect of it. But I totally understand that. And I like that. Like you're still like accumulating your own aesthetic in your profile.
Yeah, and I'd say it's, at least in my experience, it's pretty easy to spot the people that are lying. For example, my friend was just on the apps and she showed me this one guy that she had sent a few messages back and forth with. And then we zoomed in on one of his pictures on his hands, and it was so clear that it was like an AI generated image with AI generated hands. They're like melting into each other. So it's pretty, I think there's certain things that are like pretty easy to tell if someone's going to be lying to you just based on their images and the things that they write. Yeah, there's some tells, thank goodness.
And the biggest area I experienced an aspect of dishonesty is when people's pictures were older and were clearly not a representation of what they currently look like. So if you are someone who your newest picture is like several years old and you look quite different than you did before, and you're thinking, oh, this will be a great way of getting people to meet up with me and then really fall in love with me, I don't recommend that strategy. I think it's much better to use, as Sydney said, feel free to use your best pictures, but that are recent and that are largely a reflection of how you currently look in terms of your body size, your hairstyle, things like that, because it's very disappointing to people to get stoked about you and then go on a date and then be like, wah, wah, this person looks nothing like their pictures. So just save everybody the time and the hassle and use the best pictures that are a current reflection of what you look like. And then if someone doesn't like you, then they won't go on a date with you. And the people who do still want to go out with you are people more likely to be into you.
And on that note, please, for heaven's sake, put a clear photo of your face. There are so many people who have like, it's far away, or like they're wearing sunglasses and you're kind of like, okay, they might look like this or they might look like this. So highly recommend just putting a clear photo that shows your face.
On the intentions topic, because I think that's really important, I really like coaching my patients on dating app stuff and texting and dating in general. And one thing I found is that people are often frightened to be honest in their profile and be specific. But it turns out you can actually save yourself a lot of time and hassle by in your text being very specific about what you want. So first you have to do some internal reflection. Am I just looking for hookups? Am I just looking for casual dating? Am I looking for hookups, but I'm open to it turning into something serious? So you have to look inward a little bit and figure out, what am I game for and what am I interested in? But once you figure that out, you can put that in the text. So regardless of what buttons are available, and that's going to depend on which app you're on, you can actually write in almost every single app, there's room for text. You could actually write, I'm open to hookups, but I'm excited for something to turn into a long-term relationship. And in the long run, that's my preference. Or I'm game for it to be casual dating, but I would prefer a partner in the long run. Or no matter what, I'm not going to do monogamy. And please only pursue me if you are serious about a non-monogamous relationship. Or I'm only open to people of this gender. Or I'm only open to people with no children. If you have children, please don't contact me. Or I currently have X number of children. If you don't want someone with children, please don't reach out. Or please know that I have X number of children. You can be really specific, and then that's going to weed a certain amount of people out. And if you're uncertain, one of your first messages could be, by the way, did you read that I have X number of children? Or did you read that I'm only interested in people who want this to turn into a long-term relationship? And if they're like, no, I never read that, or, oh, that's actually not what I'm wanting, you can even fairly quickly weed people out. And then once you've gotten that out of the way, then you know that ostensibly they're looking for what you're looking for.
You guys, do you ever feel like overwhelmed with the amount of choices that you have? And then does that lead to a certain level of exhaustion about the dating situation? When you're going to a coffee shop or you're at a party or someone says, hey, you want to meet my friend? The options are much more limited. But on a dating app, from what you've described, you could meet hundreds of people. And I imagine that could be really overwhelming and hard to make a decision. What's that like?
I feel like for me, it is both overwhelming, but also clarifying. I feel like my experience on dating apps was very specific because when I was actively on them in a small town and also queer. So it actually created this positive, like, I don't have this overwhelming option of people, but all of a sudden I get to see online without trying to guess in person if someone else is queer. And so it cut down that like guessing game that you're playing with someone else when you are gay. Sometimes there's no guess at all, you can tell. And sometimes there's a lot of guessing. So it ended up clarifying more of my options for me, rather than like making me feel overwhelmed. It turns out I knew a lot of these people too, because I lived in a small town. So then it clarified who liked me and who I was interested in. But I feel like every time I was in a city and on an app, it did feel so overwhelming. And there's so many people and they all want to say something. But yeah, I would say in the small town that I was and with my queerness, it ended up being this really, really cool space for that connection.
What about you, Sophie?
Yeah, I agree that it's really useful for queer dating because it really, it takes out the guesswork, which is like a huge component of it is like sussing out and signaling to people whether or not they're queer, you're queer, if you're interested in them as just friends or something more. Like that's a whole process that it just cuts right through, which is good, but also that process is kind of part of what makes queer dating special and so cool. So that's a give and take there a little bit. There's positive and negative there. I would say
what do you mean by clear dating?
Oh, queer dating is when you date people, you don't just strictly date in a heterosexual way. That's what I would define as queer dating.
Oh, queer dating. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do think I got overwhelmed with the options because I was in a big city doing this. And yeah, so you'll match, at least in my experience, you match with a bunch of people and then a bunch of the conversations just fall off, whether because you didn't get back to the person or they didn't get back to you. And that didn't really bother me because there was just like such an influx. I guess I was just overwhelmed by the amount of people. So when a conversation died, it was just, okay, well, there's more people. But you do wonder what opportunity and connection you might have missed just because everyone's overwhelmed with the number of options.
Was that true for you, Jacob?
So I'm trying deliberately to not be super gendered because I've gotten dinged for that when I've been teaching in the past. But here is an example where I think gender really does matter. So as Sophie alluded to earlier, women tend to get a lot more matches than men, like a lot more. So I did not suffer from the problem of getting so many matches. I didn't know what to do. I was on the other side. I was the one who was like, oh man, I wish I was matching more with people I was interested in. But I did get some matches for sure. One thing I'll say for women who are interested in men, because of that ratio imbalance, even if a conversation died like 3 weeks ago, let's say you look back and you're like, oh, that guy seemed pretty cool. You could just throw a Hail Mary and be like, hey, I was pretty busy and I kind of dropped off. Do you want to go get coffee this weekend? Or do you want to go take a walk this weekend? And a huge amount of guys will be like, yeah, sure. Like they're not going to care that it dropped off. They're not going to be really offended. So for, people interested in men and probably some amount of women too would be understanding and be like, yeah, like that's fine. These things happen. So please don't think because it dropped off, there's zero chance it could work out. The momentum is valuable, but I think you can still throw a pass and some amount of time people will be like, yeah, let's go meet up.
How do you cope with being rejected? I imagine that you're rejecting people that aren't interesting to you on their profiles, but it might also affect your self-esteem or lead to feelings of insecurity or pessimism about ever finding a relationship when you're rejected. What's that like?
I can start this one off with my take on the algorithm. So in my experience, when you first get on the app, they give you a ton of matches and a ton of people you'll be interested in. This is Hinge specifically. And then once you're on there for a while, they start to understand who you might be interested in, and they'll keep them in a certain section where you have to send them roses. And that's how they get money, is by making you buy the roses. So I hope that was clear. But anyways, it became frustrating because it's like, yeah, it was pessimistic because it was like all the people that I would be interested are sequestered in this certain section and you can't reach them. So yeah, I became pessimistic, and the people that you scroll through, the majority of them, you're like, oh, I'm not super interested. I'm not super interested. And so that's why I actually ended up getting off the apps, because I was like, this is so annoying that everyone I would be interested in is not available to me, and it's in this certain section. I should just meet people in real life.
Can you explain that a little bit? What do you mean they're sequestered in a certain section?
Yeah. So, okay, let me take a step back. So on Hinge, the structure is there's the general people that you can look through and decide whether or not you want to match with. And you send them, I think you send them a heart or something. You send them a like. And then there's another section where they keep people they think you'll be really interested in. And you can send them a rose, but you only get one rose a day unless you pay for more roses. So it's really intense. It's either like you send someone a rose and they're the chosen person of the day, and that's a really intense gesture, it feels like. Or you just don't access any of those people, or you only get to access one a day. And the majority of the people you're scrolling through are not that interesting to you. I don't know, Sid, maybe you can explain that a little better or touch on that.
I feel like you explained it really well. But yeah, like it's for the app to make money, of course, and then they understand who you like at that point. So they're more focused on being able to make that money by you paying for that extra rose. But yeah.
And so it started to feel like I don't want my dating to be commodified for you. And that made me feel pessimistic of like, oh, you know the people I like and you're not letting me reach them. So I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah.
So then instead of one monthly fee, you're paying a monthly fee for the app and then additional costs to send people roses that you're interested in.
Sometimes you're not. On Hinge, I don't even think you pay a monthly fee. If you don't want to, you can do it for free. But some of them you do. But I would say, like Sophie said, sending someone a rose felt like a big deal. It felt like the biggest thing you could do on that app to get someone's attention. So it must be a major crush, or like you think that person's really attractive.
I can comment on the rejection piece, Rhonda. So one of the best things I learned from David was this practice of rejection training. So with a lot of patients, I take them out of the office and we go and deliberately get rejected over and over and over. I'm excited. I've never taught a workshop at Esalen before, and I'm teaching one in September, and we're going to be doing a lot of exercises to help people get over social anxiety and shyness, and talk about dating and flirting. And huge amounts of my clients have suffered from getting rejected and it really bothering them. They can be very sensitive to rejection. They can have it affect their self-esteem. It demotivates them to take chances in the future. But the nice thing is there's a thing people can do to get desensitized to rejection and not really care nearly as much. So I've now done this with people hundreds of times on my own and with clients. So we'll leave the office and we'll go out and we'll get rejected on purpose. And that can be something very innocuous. Like you can ask someone, oh, I like your hat. Can I have that? Or can I have your backpack? Or would you like to give me your phone? To, if people are feeling more adventurous, you can say, oh, would you like to give me your phone number? Or could I take you out on a date? Or can I marry you? Or, anything that clearly has a romantic interest. And people will often say no. And you're ready for a no, you're expecting a no, and then you get a no and you're like, oh, the world is still basically the same as it was before. I can get a no. I don't have to take this personally. This doesn't have to mean anything about me as a human or my worth as a person. It just means that person said no. So that way that I approached them and with who they are and their preferences and their desires, it was a no. That's fine. And you can just do this over and over and over. And then with practice, your skin gets a lot thicker. And now I could walk up to anybody and get rejected and I wouldn't really care just because I've done it so many times. And that can end up being like a superpower, because if you don't really care if you get rejected, you can put yourself out there a lot more and go for people you're interested in. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And sometimes it might work out.
Yeah. And I think that's a skill that women or feminine people don't get taught enough, to be the person who can go out and get rejected.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that, Sophie?
Yeah, I think in our culture, a lot of times the more masculine person is the one who is encouraged or taught just through life experience and cultural practice that they should be the one who can go out and talk to people and pursue people. And it's not a skill that is encouraged so much for feminine people. So it makes you feel disempowered because it's like, okay, other people get to choose me and I never get to choose other people. So I think that's a really valuable thing for feminine people to practice as well. And it's hard. It's really hard.
And why is it hard? Not that I'm not arguing your point, but I'd like to hear why it's hard for you. What kind of feelings or what are the issues?
I feel like I can add to that. I feel like I'm going to try and say it the least confusing way, because even in the moment when you're trying to regain that ability to go out and pursue somebody and you pursue them, then all of a sudden you feel conflicted by the inner thoughts of, why did this person not pursue me? And
why is this person what?
Not pursuing me.
Oh,
and
yeah.
all of the thoughts that come with that and that you're taught growing up as a feminine person of not being the person that was pursued in the first place, and how that is negative and how that impacts like the rest of your relationship with them, and also like why you are not good enough to be pursued. As we know, it means none of that. Pursuing someone is a really beautiful thing. But yeah, that is what we definitely were raised to think in many ways. And obviously it's not like all femme people, but predominantly, I would say society tells us to feel that we need to be pursued. Yeah.
Does the dating app create that imbalance when society tells you to be pursued? And how challenging is it then to reach out to someone when you're breaking that conditioning?
I think that is one good thing about dating apps, is that it's much easier to pursue people that you would be interested in, because you're not doing it face to face. Face to face is so much scarier than like, okay, I liked this person and they matched with me, so obviously they're interested in me. And then it becomes easier to pursue someone. That's much easier than in real life, walking up to someone and just being like, hey, do you want to go on a date? Obviously, that's much scarier. So I think that is one good thing about dating apps, for sure.
Yeah, I've been thinking about Jacob's point. I really like the practice of getting rejected, because I would say my mindset in the past has been pretty, like, I wouldn't say it's a positive in the end, because when I get rejected on dating apps, my reaction is, oh, that person doesn't know me. Mm-hmm. So, I'm awesome and I'm great, and I'm sad that they couldn't take the time to know me. And although that is true, sometimes I didn't let them get to know me for the reason of like risk of rejection. But yeah, so practicing that probably would help that too.
Can you tell us more? What you just said was something really interesting to me, although all the things you say are really interesting. But you said sometimes I don't let them get close to me to see me for fear of rejection, and then they reject me because they don't know me. I think that's what you said.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, because on the dating apps, it's the profile that you create. And so if someone does reject you, like in my mind, it's a lot easier to be like, oh, they don't know all of me, so they're not rejecting all of me. Or they're not rejecting me for me, they're rejecting me because like we all have a spectrum of who we're attracted to. And maybe I'm not high on that spectrum. And that's all good. But it leads to sometimes me making less connections, because when someone gets to know me, that can't be the answer anymore. But also it still can be like they're on their spectrum of attraction and maybe I'm not that person. But they know more of me and it feels like they're rejecting more.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if you really make yourself open and vulnerable and let somebody see more about the real you, that's kind of a risk, because then it's more painful for you to get rejected. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I would say so. And I would say because of that, for me, most people I've dated like longer term that I met off of dating apps are now my friends because we created a relationship. And so now we get to be friends because of it. But I struggle with losing people that I let get to know me.
So it's painful for you, and I'm familiar with this, that sometimes the relationships move into friendships rather than romantic relationships, and that might be some compensation, but also quite a disappointment and frustrating, if I'm hearing it right.
Yeah, I feel like it always depended on the situation for me. I feel like I am so deeply grateful for the friends that I found on dating apps and through that experience. I love them all so much, and a lot of them are some of like my best friends out of college, because we went on 2 dates and realized we're kind of the same person. And that was fun to date, but it wouldn't be fun to be friends too. And so it was like sometimes disappointing, and sometimes I was like, this is awesome. You get to be part of my long-term community.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. I literally, right before this podcast, texted this woman who was a former partner and now a friend who lives in Oakland. I was like, happy birthday. Or a few days ago, I was texting someone I met through dating and now we're friends. And so I think so much of dating is the mindset you bring to it. So I generally really enjoy dating, and I assumed a very small fraction of the people I matched with or were interested in would turn into long-term partners. But it was fun getting to know people. So sometimes I went on dates and it didn't turn into anything, but it was interesting, or it was curious, or I got a good story out of it. Other times it turned into a friendship. Other times it turned into a hookup. Other times it turned into a relationship. But I think if you go into it with the attitude of, cool, I'll get to meet new humans. This can be fun. I can bring some playfulness to it. It doesn't have to be super heavy and serious. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work out with an individual person. There's plenty of people. I think that makes it more fun.
So, Jacob, you never felt exhausted by the experience?
Very rarely. And I would go on up to like 3 dates in a day sometimes when at the peak. I found it fun, but I generally like people, and I didn't bring a heaviness to it. So each person I could ask like silly questions of, or be ridiculous, or because also if you decide pretty soon you think you're never going to see this person again, you can just ask like even more ridiculous questions, or you can, have fun with it. So I generally did not find it exhausting. I generally found it pretty fun. I also wanted to make it fun. So if you're someone who's always proposing getting a drink, or you're always proposing getting coffee at the same coffee shop, that's a little boring. So mix it up, take someone mini golfing, or go ask them to get ice cream, or go ice skating. Or I met someone at a hot springs and we did a hot springs date. You could take someone to a concert. You could take someone to a comedy club. Even if you're the one getting asked out, you could be like, I've actually had a lot of coffee lately. What if we do this instead? So feel free to bring some creativity to it. It doesn't have to be boring.
I love that advice. That's great advice. And it also shows more of your personality and the other person's personality, because when you're just getting coffee, it's a little bland. But if you're going mini golfing, I think you'd learn a lot more fun stuff about someone. Yeah, I love that advice.
I'm experiencing this as kind of a just people chatting about dating apps, and I'm wondering, are there any problems we're trying to solve here, or themes that we're trying to create? Are there things about dating apps that are hard and painful for people that we could contribute to that in some way, or should we just keep chatting? Which is fine. It's just not my normal role.
I think a problem with the dating apps for me, which we touched on, I think the main problems, if I was going to list them, would be how impersonal they are, how overwhelming they are in terms of
Can I list these? Let's just slow down. These are great, Sophie. Number one, how impersonal they are.
Yeah. How overwhelmed you can be by options and choices. And I would also just say Sid touched on this earlier, but the practice of creating a self-image on the app, and Jacob can probably touch on this as well, can be really trippy. Like, what do I want to present in this small amount of space about myself? How will that resonate with other people? Will that attract the type of people that I'm interested in? So yeah, cultivating the writing, the images, what prompts you're choosing, all of that can feel a little daunting and a little self-conscious.
Well, let's go through those three a little bit. The first thing you said, the first challenge is how impersonal the dating apps are is a challenge. Tell us a little bit about that and why that might feel like a challenge to you, Sophie.
Yeah, well, first of all, a common thing with Hinge is that people won't even read what you've written. They'll just scroll through and look at all the images. And it's a little creepy that someone would be interested in you just based on pictures of you. And nothing more. That's a little creepy and impersonal, and it does feel objectifying, like we talked about earlier. How you can feel like an object and other people can feel like just random heads floating in space on your phone instead of real people out there in the world.
And what would you want people to know about you other than a pretty face?
Yeah, I think I think for me, it's really important for people to understand my intellect and my humanity. And that's really hard to communicate through questions like, what are your favorite hobbies? Or, like, what's a silly thing about you? It's really hard to get across who you are essentially as a person.
Yeah. Tell us about your intellect and humanity. We probably won't end up on a date, but I think it will be fun for us to find out what you would like people to know about you. And then once you've told us that, you can tell us something silly about you.
Yeah. Okay. I think as a woman, it can feel really, really exhausting when people are just interested in you based on your physicality. So for me, it's important that people know that I really love to read books. I really love to study neural nets and cognitive science. And something silly about me is that I say ketchup instead of ketchup. No, I say ketchup instead of ketchup. Yeah, I say ketchup instead of ketchup. Yeah. And it always throws people off.
Yeah. But the one of the two things was that your interest in neural networks, which is very awesome. I've been kind of wondering about that myself. I think I have to watch a movie on AI. I think there's some pretty good ones that are recommended. I just haven't had the time to look at them and to figure out how all of that works. But that does sound interesting. And what was the other thing that you like to read books?
Yeah, I love to read books.
And what kind of books do you like to read?
I love to read about ecology, and I love to read British literature. And then I also love to read really cheesy melodramatic books as well. Right.
Now, have you, what would be a cheesy melodramatic book? That sounds very interesting.
Oh, we're going in. I just finished Daisy Jones and the Six. That was a very entertaining read. Yeah, they made a TV show about that one too.
Oh, that's awesome. I've only read 2 or 3 books in my whole life, so I don't know. I probably haven't read a lot of them, but that sounds neat. Now, have you ever put that out there on an app as your personal profile? like I'm your person if you're into neural networks and cheesy melodramatic British books.
Well, now I guess I should go back on the apps and write this on my profile because it's actually pretty good.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, you can send us a message. Do that for homework and let us know, because that might be pretty awesome. Thank you. That's interesting. Tell us about point number 2: overwhelmed by options and choices.
Yeah, I think I touched on this a bit earlier too. But when you have so many matches, it's hard to know who you actually want to go on a date with. Who is actually going to be fun and worth my time? And should I really get to know someone a little bit before I go on the date because my time is valuable, or should I just meet up with as many people as possible? That's a hard.
How do you reconcile that? I mean, what is your approach? Let's say, because I think it's like having a full-time job, being on these dating apps and or even dating before dating apps was a full-time job. It's a kind of exhausting and time-consuming and a pain in the ass and a lot of frustration and disappointment and wasted time. Although if you can make it fun, like what you were saying, Jacob, it can kind of change the tone of it a lot, so it's not such a chore. But so you're looking for something fairly serious, Sophie?
I don't think so. No, I think also just looking for fun and to meet people and try new things. So I think it's important to just, at least the conclusion I came to is it's important to only go on dates with people that you think you could be really interested in. And yeah, like Jacob said, to have it be a fun thing, even if you're just getting to know someone, it doesn't have to be so serious.
Right. Do you find that some people are too deadly serious and kind of turns you off?
I didn't have that experience personally, but I'm sure that does exist in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I saw a lot when in my clinical practice among men would be, I shouldn't have to play the game. I want a woman to love me the way I am, and the way they were was fairly dreadful.
Can I offer a solution to both the impersonal and the feeling overwhelmed by amount?
Yeah, that sounds great.
If you're someone who's in the position of getting a lot of matches, which I think is in some ways kind of the superior position, that you have a lot of choices, from my perspective, it's okay to get more selective and you could weed people out. So here's one way you could weed people out. If you're tired of people just looking at your pictures, in your text, you could say something like, I'm looking for people who actually read what I'm writing and aren't just looking at my pictures. So if you do not include the word purple in your message, I will not even bother reading it. So make sure to include that in the message. Or make sure whatever else you put in the message, tell me a book you've enjoyed in your life. And if that's not in there, I won't respond. Or something like that. And then people who either don't read the text or don't want to bother putting any effort in, you can weed them out. And the people who actually put time into being like, I loved 1984, or I really enjoyed Pride and Prejudice, and, purple is in my top 7 favorite colors, or something like that, then those people at least have put in some effort, and that they didn't just look at your pictures, and you'll get to see what do they do with that, right? How creative can they be? Can they be clever? Can they be funny? Can they be silly? So that could weed a lot of people out. And I think if you're in that position of getting a lot more matches than you want, you're welcome to be selective, and you can have people jump through hoops to get you to write back and see who's willing to jump through the hoops.
And let me ask you this question, Jacob. If you ask people to jump through hoops, to have a date with you in a kind of a fun way, as you're saying, I see, we've got someone beautiful someone to date right down there with 2 beautiful ears. Uh, yeah, yeah. Cat,
If you're on
I'm a
FetLife.
Sophie for cats. Oh, that looks a little like my Obi. Uh, what will happen to the dynamic between the two?
I liked it. I remember a few women who I had to jump through some hoops, and I was like, oh, like she clearly gets a lot of matches. Like I can do this. Like I can actually read the profile and come up with something clever. And then they were kind of excited that I'd done the hoops and we jumped back. And I felt like, oh, this person, they're hard to get. So I was more interested in them versus if I could write anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking when you were talking, Sophie, I love what you were saying and what you were saying, Jacob, because I have this little rule I call the Burns rule is people only want what they can't get and they never want what they can get. And so if you're taking charge and saying, here's kind of what I'm looking for, here's some of my interests, and, I'd love to hear, blah, blah, blah about you as well. I think it would make you, I'm sure you're already very desirable on the dating apps, but you would be, then you would develop what we call the queen bee phenomenon. Like all the men in the world would be yours, or all the people, let's say men and women, all the people in the world would be yours because you're taking charge. I mean, you could try it as an experiment and let us know what happens. And you might not want so much attention, but I think what you're saying, Jacob, would be would fire up, a tremendous amount of responsiveness in the guys, and they would, snap to, oh, this one's a little different. This is something special. Did I get that right, Jacob?
Yeah. And to add on to that, if you're the one who's in the pursuer role, please don't just write, hey, or what's up, or how was your weekend, or hi. Those are really boring and they take no creativity. And people who get a lot of messages, they're not going to be excited like, oh, how was your weekend? Wow, that's so original. I've never heard that before. Let me write a long paragraph about my weekend. No, they're not really interested in that. So actually read people's profile. So I remember that was kind of my default is if I found someone's pictures appealing, then I would actually read their profile. And then I would send a message that made it clear that I'd read their profile and put a little work into it. So I recommend doing that. Don't just write a very generic thing that then someone's just going to dismiss. So put a little effort into it and the payoff can be large.
I feel really, I love that, like Jacob's it feels like your big suggestion is like really stay true to yourself and embody who you are on the internet. And I really love that. And that is something like I would love to work to do in all of my different profiles on the internet. But I do think it is something that's really hard to do. And I feel like it's definitely really hard to do when you grew up on the internet. And Sophie and I have talked about this like a lot recently, of that like everything we did growing up is permanently on the internet. And so we feel less like we want to be embarrassed, or less likely to do something that could be a little bit embarrassing. And sometimes dating feels like that, and pursuing someone feels like that. And so I would say like, oh, I love this, and I would love to enact it at some point in my life. But it's hard, and it's really hard when you spent part of your childhood creating a profile and creating your internet profile and your internet experience.
I love what you're saying, Sydney. So what would be something about you that you would be on the fence about putting on your profile for fear of it being permanently on the internet, but you're toying with the idea?
See, I don't even have like a specific example right now. But I could tell you, like, even today, writing my bio, I felt so existential in what I could put for my future, because I didn't want to be held to that future in any way, because I know this is going on the internet. And so that's the way my brain thinks. I know Sophie very well. We're childhood best friends. I know so many things that I would put on her profile. And as Rhonda brought up, she's an amazing guitarist, an amazing singer, but Sophie's never going to bring that up about herself. She doesn't like to perform in front of other people, but it's a big part of her life. And so those are little examples where I feel like our generation keeps those things to ourselves and we don't stay as true to ourselves on the internet as probably we should. But yeah.
Yeah. Can I respond? Yeah, go ahead, Sophie.
Well, I was just popping in to say I highly agree. Yeah. Back to you, Jacob.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. My response to that would be, it's easy to get self-conscious on these things. Like I have to have like the right profile and I have to have like the right image. And I think sometimes that makes the stakes seem very high. And I think the stakes are actually lower than they seem. So for example, I love scuba diving. So maybe I would have a picture of me scuba diving. And would that turn some people off? Maybe. Okay, who cares? Will I necessarily love scuba diving in 20 years? I don't know, probably. But if not, that's not the end of the world. It just means at that time I love scuba diving. Or I'm currently really into surfing. I could easily see a picture of me surfing and I might write about surfing. And if that turns some people off, that's okay. And if some people like it, that's cool. Or I love fantasy novels. I might put, I'm really into fantasy novels. And if that turns off some people, that's okay. And that doesn't mean in 10 years I have to love fantasy novels, but I think it's okay. Like if Sophie were to hypothetically put, I'm really stoked about neural nets and I love British novels and cheesy melodramatic books. And if you're going to message me, make sure to include the word ecology into Skid Row into the message, whatever it is. I think there's still going to be plenty of people that are interested and it's true enough to who she is. And then you can have fun with it. I think people often are too serious. I think it's fine to have a picture where you're kind of silly or you're with your friends, you're being ridiculous. And, if that turns some people off, then screw them. But I wouldn't assume the stakes have to be super high.
Yeah, and I love that. And I do think like in the like our generation, like the silliness aspect of it is there. Like people will post memes like as a profile picture, or they'll post really silly photos of themselves. But yeah, I would say as a group, we take it to the extreme level of seriousness. And like people's like Instagram profiles are linked. Like it's also like social networking in some ways. But yeah, the internet feels like still, no matter where you are, a place to create a profile, and that has impact. But yeah, I would love to shift the whole idea of the internet in my brain to just be something that I could be honest and true to myself on. But I haven't yet, and I don't know when I will, but I'm working on it.
I think if I was going to bring up another theme for challenges, how I would encapsulate what Sid is saying, and tell me if this is wrong, Sid, and this is not what you mean, but our generation is so afraid of being cringy. Like being too sincere, being too authentic, or not cultivating your profile and being cringy. I don't know. Does that kind of encapsulate what you're talking about, Sid?
What's cringy? We're not supposed to be cringy. What does that mean?
Cringy is when you get secondhand embarrassment from something that someone else did, or you get embarrassed from something that you did. And again, I would say it all often comes when like people are too sincere or too serious about something that doesn't seem that serious. That is often very cringy. And I have a fear of being cringy, and I would not want to be cringy on the dating apps. What do you think, Sid?
I think that's a good way to put it. And like I said earlier, like you can be funny and you can make fun of yourself, but like the things that you do, like when they're sincere and then it's laughable, people will be laughing.
We need your advice, Jacob.
Yeah, I kind of like cringy. I kind of like awkwardness. I remember I had a whole profile on OkCupid for a few months that was just like super cringy, just because I thought it was funny. So I think that, like, let's take the neural nets example, right? Let's say you said something like, I could geek out and spend the whole date just talking about neural nets. If that turns you on, message me. I think that's great. And if someone's like, oh my gosh, he's so into neural nets, again, forget them, right? So I think it's okay. Or you could be like, I really want someone who is into enthusiastic verbal consent. And that's something that's really important to me. And if you're not into that, please don't bother messaging me. That's sincere. Again, if that turns someone off, that's okay. If you guys are in the position of getting more matches than you would prefer, I think you can be ever more selective and ever more forcing people to jump through hoops. And then you'll get the people who are interested in what you're interested in. So I would play around with it. Like I would try to have less fear about it and be like, I love this thing, or I'm really into this, or this thing is terribly important to me. And see, I think you'll still get plenty of matches.
What is it, Sophie? Yeah, thank you. That's great. What is it, Sophie? You mentioned that you're reluctant to express your interest in guitar and singing. I think I heard that.
Sydney let that secret slip.
Yeah.
I just don't talk about it that often, even in real life. It's just sort of something I do here and there, but I don't make it a big deal, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
and what's your fear about what would happen if you were to mention that on a profile?
Oh, okay. Well, have you seen the Barbie movie?
Yeah.
Okay, do you remember when Ken is singing to Barbie and the whole joke is like, wow, he doesn't realize it's so cringy that he's singing to her right now. That's the fear, is being Ken in the Barbie movie.
Yeah. I would find that endearing if I was looking at someone's profile and they were like, I adore singing and playing guitar and it just makes my day. I would be like, oh, this person's so awesome.
Well, thank you. That's really nice to hear.
Yeah, I feel like I'm learning also beyond dating apps. But in my daily life, I will continue what Jacob is saying as like ideas of internet profiles. Not as I'm currently not on dating apps and in a monogamous relationship as well. I feel like this is a broader lesson I feel like it's true throughout our generation that we just like everything we do on the internet is either really purposefully cringy or not at all, and you're protecting your profile. But to learn to stay true to myself.
And that doesn't mean you have to disclose everything, right? Like your filter might be, if someone took a screenshot and put this on a website, how upset would I be? Like you might not put on your profile, I'm always subby and I really want people to tie me up. And I've been really into butt plugs lately. You might not put that on your profile, right? Because you might not want like that screenshot going up on a website. But you could say like, oh, I enjoy exploring power dynamics, or I'm interested in novelty, winky face, or I like people who are game for experimentation, or you can use kind of code for things. And even if someone took a screenshot of that, it wouldn't be a big deal. But I think in general, authenticity is good. And feel free to put more of who you are on there, and then it'll screen out people that aren't looking for that.
Can you explain to us a little bit, Jacob, about the importance of tone, and in particular playfulness, as opposed to seriousness or defensiveness or whatever?
Yeah, I agree with you, David, when you were saying earlier, a lot of your clients are too serious. One of the biggest things my clients tell me, regardless of their gender, regardless of sexuality, is they like people with a good sense of humor. They like playfulness. So I think people often get way too serious and they think, oh, I need to show them that I'm serious and I need to ask them, how was your weekend? And I need to give a very serious response of how my weekend was. And it's more boring that way. So I think it's more boring for everybody. You'll get less dates if you're serious and the other person will find it more boring. But if instead someone's like, how was your weekend? And you were like, oh my gosh, it was so great. I was chasing squirrels and I caught 7 of them. And the squirrel stew was a little more gamey than usual. But thankfully, I had my stamp collection to back it up. So I added 7 new stamps and I got a new magnifying glass on the internet 4 days ago, and it has 20 times magnification. It was the best weekend ever. Like that might be one of my messages, right? So you can be totally silly and ridiculous, and generally people like that more than being too serious.
I have another question. Is it better to impress people with yourself or with themselves when you're talking to them? In other words, is it better to express an interest in other people and let them know how awesome they are as long as you're not serious about it? Or is it more important to try to impress them with yourself?
Yeah, definitely themselves. So in TEAM CBT, we talk about this thing called the talk show host technique. And the best thing I learned from that is it's so easy for us to fall under the illusion, oh, I need to impress this other person. I need to get them to see how great I am, how smart I am, how impressive I am. But that's really a turnoff to a lot of people. I've had definitely clients that have gotten feedback that they're too braggy. But if instead you turn the spotlight on the other person and you show curiosity and you're like, oh, what are you into? Or what gets you excited these days? Or tell me about you, and let them talk and be kind of the star. People love that. Almost, not everyone, but most people's favorite topic is themselves. So if you get them talking about what they're excited about or what they're good at, they're going to enjoy the conversation with you more. So particularly once you're on a date with someone, shining the spotlight on them, I think, is really the way to go.
Well, you guys, we're going to have to close pretty soon. And I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast and having the conversation and answering the questions. And Jacob, it's been really great to have you. You are a person, like you said, but you're also a really experienced adolescent and adult psychiatrist. In the past few years, you've put on the Finding Humans Less Scary workshop for free. And you alluded to it, that you're giving a class, the similar class at Esalen. People have had a little taste of what they're going to get there, but I was wondering if you could tell us the dates and how to sign up for that if people are interested in working more with you.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Rhonda. So I've never taught at Esalen before. I'm pretty excited to do that. September 8th to the 12th. It's called Finding Humans Less Scary. So people go to esalen.org, ESALEN.org, and type Jacob Towery or Finding Humans Less Scary. They can sign up there, and it's going to be a fun week. So it's going to be a lot for people with social anxiety and shyness, and it's going to be very experiential. It's not just going to be kind of talk. It's going to be a lot of activities people can do to feel less self-conscious, learn how to develop more intimate and authentic connections with other people, learn how to be vulnerable, learn how to start a conversation, continue a conversation, make more friends, deepen friendships. And then Esalen said, hey, could you add in a little more on dating and flirting than you normally do? And I was like, yeah, that sounds fun. So it's actually given me an excuse to read more on dating and flirting and take more workshops recently so I can teach it more. So we're going to have also stuff for people who want to practice dating and flirting. So it should be a really fun week.
And Sophie and Sydney, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom and your experience with us. It's been really fun having you.
Thanks for inviting us, and thanks for all the great advice.
Yeah, thank you.
David, do you want to invite people to our next episode?
Yes, if you're interested in today's podcast, join us next week for our fantastic dating episode, which will feature, Rhonda?
Kyle Jones and Carly Zankman.
Oh, okay. And what are Kyle and Carly going to be teaching us?
Well, today we just touched a little bit on the inner thoughts that get created when we're rejected or when we have been ghosted. And Kyle and Carly are going to talk about how to address the inner negative thoughts that people have as a result of their experiences on dating apps.
So there's two crucial things in dating. Your external voice, like I'm talking to you now, Sydney, I'm talking to you now, Sophie, and to Jacob and to all of you out there, and to you, Rhonda. And part of it is, what am I doing that's effective and ineffective? What helps you score in dating and have greater success, and what kind of communication turns other people off, or how do you handle when somebody's being critical of you, or when a date is boring? What do you do when a date is boring to make it instantly exciting? There is an answer to that question. And then the inner dialogue would be all the insecurity of, am I attractive enough, or what if I get rejected? And, a young woman came to me who had broken up with her boyfriend, and she said, Dr. Burns, does this mean I'm unlovable? And she was very, very sad and depressed. And so sometimes you have to work on your inner dialogue. And I think another theme that we might come up with is the fear of being alone. Are you dating in order to find happiness and self-esteem that you can't give to yourself when you're alone? And if so, what are the secrets for finding happiness when you're alone? And can that have an empowering effect when you then go into dating? Because you're not going to be needy. You're going to be dating because you want to date, you want a loving relationship, and not because you need a loving relationship in order to feel happy or worthwhile.
All right. Well, thank you so much, David and Sophie, Sydney, and Jacob. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. We love you all, Sydney and Sophie and Jacob and Rhonda and Sydney's cat. I loved it, although I saw just a little bit of her or him.
Yeah, Cookie's a character.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.